The fluorescent lights at Heathrow Terminal 5 buzzed like angry wasps as I stood there, staring at the departure board with the kind of disbelief usually reserved for lottery winners and cancer diagnoses. Flight BA 2847 to Boston was boarding, and according to the cheerful woman behind the British Airways desk, my ticket had been cancelled exactly 43 minutes ago. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kepler, but the cancellation came from the primary cardholder's phone," she explained with that practiced sympathy airlines perfect for delivering bad news. "Mrs. Mara Solin cancelled both tickets at 14:17. Both tickets. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I turned slowly, scanning the terminal's chaos of rolling luggage and hurried goodbyes, looking for my wife's distinctive auburn hair. There, across the concourse at the champagne bar, Mara sat with her back to me, leaning intimately toward a man in an expensive suit. Even from 50 yards away, I could see her hand resting on his thigh, her body language screaming intimacy. The fight we'd had an hour earlier replayed in my head like a broken record. "You're suffocating me, Julian," she'd hissed outside the security checkpoint. "Always analyzing, always questioning. Can't you just trust me for once?" Trust. The irony tasted like copper pennies. My name is Julian Kepler, and up until 43 minutes ago, I thought I was a happily married cybersecurity consultant heading home to Boston after a week-long conference in London. Now I was apparently a soon-to-be divorced man, stranded at one of the world's busiest airports with no wallet. Mara had insisted on carrying both our passports and credit cards in her purse for safekeeping, and a phone that had mysteriously stopped during our argument. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I was contemplating my limited options when a woman's voice cut through my mental spiral. "Excuse me, but you look like you've just been hit by a double-decker bus." I turned to find myself face to face with one of the most striking women I'd ever seen. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her tailored navy suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check your bank balance. "Something like that," I managed, trying to summon what remained of my dignity. She studied me for a moment, her gaze sharp and calculating. "Julian Kepler, right? You audited my family's real estate holdings about 2 years ago. Aria Venton." She extended a manicured hand. The name clicked. Venton Properties. Old Boston money. The kind of family that had streets named after them. During the audit, I'd been impressed by her sharp questions and obvious intelligence, though we'd barely spoken directly. "Ms. Venton, what are the odds?" "In my experience, Mr. Kepler, there are no coincidences in airports." Her smile was enigmatic. "I couldn't help but notice your wife over there with Lukas Brandt. They seem close." The way she said his name told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a chance encounter. "You know him?" "Unfortunately. He's been sniffing around my family's business for months, trying to convince us to partner with his development firm. Charming man, if you like the type who considers wedding rings more of a suggestion than a commitment." A camera flash went off somewhere behind us, followed by another. Aria's expression shifted, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Damn paparazzi," she muttered. "They've been following me since the Forbes article came out last month." She looked at me appraisingly, then made what appeared to be a split-second decision. "Mr. Kepler, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "Stand next to me. Act like my husband." Her voice was crisp, authoritative. "Your wife will regret this." Before I could respond, she stepped closer, slipping her arm through mine with practiced ease. The photographers, apparently satisfied with whatever story they were constructing, moved on to harass some minor celebrity near the duty-free shop. Why? I asked. Because, Mr. Kepler, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, and right now, you could use some leverage. She nodded toward the champagne bar, where Mara and Lukas were now kissing with the enthusiasm of teenagers. How long has this been going on? I honestly don't know. The admission tasted bitter. Maybe months, maybe longer. I've been traveling a lot for work, and she's been distant. Aria's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Is that what we're calling it? Tell me, when did you start sleeping in separate bedrooms? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. How did you... Lucky guess. Men who've been relegated to the guest room have a particular look about them. She studied my face with the intensity of a chess master planning her next move. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk over to that bar, and you're going to introduce me as your business partner. Nothing more, nothing less. Can you manage that? What's in it for you? Let's just say Lukas Brandt has been a thorn in my side for quite some time. I'd very much like to see him taken down a peg or two. Her smile was predatory. Besides, I have a feeling you're going to be much more interesting than you appear. Looking back, I should have walked away. Should have called a cab, found a hotel, figured out my own way home. But standing there in that sterile terminal, watching my wife of 12 years publicly humiliate me with another man, Aria Venton's offer felt like a lifeline. All right, I said, let's go ruin their day. We walked across the terminal together, Aria's heels clicking authoritatively on the polished floor. As we approached the champagne bar, I could hear Mara's laugh, the genuine one she used to reserve for me before our marriage became a series of polite exchanges and careful silences. Lukas Brandt was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that comes from expensive vacations and the smile of a man who'd never been told no. He was whispering something in Mara's ear when we arrived at their table. Mara, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Fancy meeting you here. My wife's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally, cold calculation. Julian, I thought you'd gone home. Change of plans. I gestured to Aria. I'd like you to meet Aria Venton. We're discussing a potential partnership. Lukas's confident smile faltered slightly when he heard Aria's name. In Boston's business circles, the Ventons were royalty, and everyone knew it. Ms. Venton, Mara said, recovering her composure with impressive speed. What a surprise. Mrs. Solon. Aria's tone was arctic. And Mr. Brandt. How cozy. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Lukas, clearly uncomfortable, attempted to regain control of the situation. Julian, isn't it? I've heard so much about you. His handshake was firm, aggressive. Mara's told me you're in computers. Cybersecurity, I corrected. I help companies protect their most sensitive information. Amazing what people think they can hide these days. The implied threat wasn't lost on him. His smile became strained. Well, Mara said, standing abruptly, we should probably head to our gate. Our flight leaves in an hour. Of course it does, I replied. Have a wonderful trip, both of you. As they gathered their things, Aria leaned close to me, her voice barely audible. Meet me at the Sofitel bar in 2 hours. We need to talk. Mara paused at my shoulder, her perfume, a scent I'd bought her for our anniversary, filling my nostrils. Julian, we'll discuss this when I get back. No, I said quietly. We won't. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps recognizing something new in my expression, then followed Lukas toward the departure gates without another word. Aria watched them go, her expression thoughtful. You handled that well. Did I? Because I feel like I just watched my marriage end in a champagne bar at Heathrow Airport. Your marriage ended long before today, Mr. Kepler. You just finally saw the body." She gathered her purse and briefcase. 2 hours. Don't disappoint me." As she walked away, I realized I was no longer the same man who'd arrived at the airport that morning. That Julian Kepler, trusting, naive, willing to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, was gone. In his place stood someone harder, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous. Mara wanted a divorce? Fine. But she was about to learn that underestimating Julian Kepler was the biggest mistake of her privileged life. The Sofitel bar was a study in understated elegance, all dark wood and soft lighting designed to make wealthy travelers forget they were in an airport. I'd spent the intervening 2 hours in a nearby internet cafe using their computers to do what I did best, dig into digital lives. What I'd found about Lukas Brandt was illuminating. 3 previous marriages, all ending in expensive divorces. A development company that was leveraged to the hilt. And most interesting of all, a pattern of targeting wealthy married women for both business and personal reasons. Mara, apparently, was just the latest mark. Aria was already seated in a corner booth when I arrived, a glass of wine untouched in front of her. She'd changed from her business suit into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car payment. "You look like a man with a plan," she observed as I slid into the seat across from her. "I'm a man with information. The plan comes next." I signaled the waitress for a whiskey. "Tell me about Lukas Brandt." "Straight to business. I like that." Aria leaned back, studying me. "Lukas is a predator. He identifies wealthy women in unhappy marriages, seduces them, and convinces them to invest in his development projects. When the projects inevitably fail, he disappears with their money and moves on to the next target." "How do you know all this?" "Because he tried it on my sister 2 years ago, cost her $3 million and nearly destroyed her marriage." Her voice was cold as winter steel. "I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor." The waitress brought my drink, and I took a sip, letting the burn focus my thoughts. "What makes you think Mara is any different from his other targets?" "Because your wife isn't just wealthy, she's smart. A partner at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious private equity firms in Boston. If Lukas can convince her to funnel client money into his projects," she left the implication hanging, "that would be securities fraud. Among other things, the kind of scandal that destroys careers and sends people to federal prison." Aria's smile was sharp. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I thought about Mara's dismissive tone during our fight, the casual way she'd canceled my ticket, the intimacy I'd witnessed between her and Lukas. 12 years of marriage, reduced to an inconvenience to be discarded. "I'm going to stop her," I said, "before she destroys her life and takes innocent people down with her." Noble, but I suspect there's more to it than that. She was right, of course. This wasn't just about protecting Mara from her own stupidity. This was about the humiliation, the betrayal, the years of feeling like I wasn't quite good enough for her world of charity galas and country club politics. "Maybe," I admitted. "What did you have in mind?" Aria pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photos. Mara and Lukas at various restaurants and hotels around Boston. Clearly intimate, clearly an ongoing affair. "I've had a private investigator following him for months," she explained. "These photos, combined with what you know about their financial entanglements, should be enough to convince Mara's partners that she's a liability. You want to destroy her career. I want to stop a crime before it happens. What happens to your wife's career is simply a side effect." Aria leaned forward. "But I need your help. You know her passwords, her habits, her weaknesses. You can get me access to information my investigator can't." It was a seductive offer. Revenge served on a silver platter, with legal justification and minimal personal risk. But something about Aria's intensity gave me pause. "What aren't you telling me?" She was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in her glass. "Lukas didn't just target my sister for her money. He recorded their encounters, used the videos to blackmail her into silence after he disappeared with her investment. Jesus! My sister attempted suicide 6 months ago. She's in a private facility in Switzerland now, trying to put her life back together. Aria's voice was steady, but I could see the rage burning behind her eyes. So yes, Mr. Kepler, this is personal for me. The question is whether it's personal enough for you. I thought about Mara's laugh at the champagne bar, the way she'd looked at Lukas like he was the most fascinating man in the world, the way she used to look at me, back when we were young and stupid and thought love could conquer anything. What do you need me to do? Aria's smile was triumphant. First, we need to get you home. I assume you don't have access to funds right now? Mara has all our credit cards, and my debit card won't work internationally without calling the bank, which I can't do without my phone. Consider that problem solved. She signaled the waitress and handed over a black American Express card. Book yourself a first-class ticket on the next flight to Boston. Consider it an advance on our partnership. I can't accept. You can and you will. This isn't charity, Mr. Kepler. It's an investment. She stood, gathering her things. I'll be in Boston tomorrow evening. We'll meet at my office and finalize our strategy. She handed me a business card with her direct number written on the back. One more thing. Don't contact your wife. Don't give her any warning about what's coming. Can you do that? I thought about Mara, probably somewhere over the Atlantic right now, planning her new life with Lukas Brandt, planning to discard me like yesterday's newspaper. That won't be a problem. Good. Aria paused at the edge of the booth. Julian. May I call you Julian? You're about to discover something important about yourself. When people push you too far, you don't just push back. You push back harder than they ever imagined possible. After she left, I sat alone in the bar, nursing my whiskey and contemplating the ruins of my old life. Somewhere in the terminal, announcements echoed in multiple languages, and travelers hurried toward their destinations with the urgency of people who knew where they belonged. For the first time in years, I felt the same urgency. I knew exactly where I was going and what I needed to do when I got there. Mara had made a critical error in judgment. She'd assumed I was weak, passive, willing to accept whatever scraps of affection she threw my way. She'd confused patience with weakness, loyalty with stupidity. She was about to learn the difference. I pulled out Aria's business card and headed for the ticket counter. It was time to go home and remind my wife that Julian Kepler wasn't the man she thought she'd married. He was much, much worse. Boston Logan Airport at midnight was a different beast entirely from Heathrow's controlled chaos. Here, the janitors outnumbered the passengers, and the few people still traveling moved with the exhausted determination of the truly desperate or the truly wealthy. I fell into the latter category now, thanks to Aria's first-class ticket. 8 hours of premium liquor and time to think had crystallized my anger into something sharper and more useful. A plan. The house Mara and I shared in Beacon Hill was dark when the taxi dropped me off, which wasn't surprising given that she was somewhere over the Atlantic with her new boyfriend. What was surprising was the Range Rover parked in our driveway, the one that definitely didn't belong to either of us. I paid the driver and approached the vehicle cautiously. Massachusetts plates, dealer tags from a luxury lot in Cambridge. Through the passenger window, I could see a woman's purse on the seat. Expensive leather, the kind Mara coveted but couldn't quite afford on her salary. Someone was in my house. The front door was unlocked, which sent my paranoia into overdrive. Mara was obsessive about security, the kind of person who checked the locks twice before bed. I slipped inside quietly, listening for voices or movement. The sound of laughter drifted down from the second floor, followed by the unmistakable clink of champagne glasses. Female voices, at least 2 of them, coming from what used to be our bedroom. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate. The bedroom door was partially open, spilling light into the hallway. Through the gap, I could see 2 women sitting on my bed, surrounded by open suitcases and scattered papers. One was Clara Morrison, Mara's best friend, and a partner at her law firm. The other was a blonde I didn't recognize, younger, wearing the kind of clothes that screamed money and poor judgment. Told her this was the perfect time, Clara was saying. Julian's so pathetic, he'll probably just roll over and accept whatever settlement we offer. Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? The blonde asked. Mara seemed nervous about leaving him at the airport. Clara's laugh was harsh. Julian Kepler is the most oblivious man on the planet. Mara's been planning this for months, and he never had a clue. By the time he figures out what's happening, all the assets will be transferred offshore. What about the prenup? What prenup? Julian was so in love he never insisted on one. Everything they own is joint property, which means Mara gets half of everything, including his consulting business. I'd heard enough. I pushed the door open and stepped into the room, enjoying the way both women's faces went pale. Actually, I said conversationally, Julian Kepler is standing right here, and he's very interested in hearing more about these offshore accounts. Clara recovered first, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Julian, we didn't expect you back so soon. I bet you didn't. I looked around the room, taking in the open suitcases filled with Mara's clothes, the legal documents spread across the dresser. Spring cleaning? The blonde, who I now realized was probably Clara's girlfriend, based on the way they were sitting, gathered up the papers protectively. We should go. No, please stay, I said, settling into the armchair by the window. I'm fascinated by this conversation about offshore accounts. Tell me more about Mara's months of planning. Clara's expression hardened. You need to leave, Julian. This is none of your business. My wife's plan to steal half my assets is none of my business? That's an interesting legal theory, Clara. I'm sure the Massachusetts Bar Association would love to hear it. You can't prove anything. Can I? I pulled out my phone. I'd bought a replacement at Logan and showed them the recording app I'd started when I heard them talking. Amazing what people will say when they think they're alone. The blonde was already standing, grabbing her purse. Clara, we need to leave. Now. But Clara was too smart to panic. She knew I had something on her, and she was calculating her options. What do you want, Julian? I want to know where my wife is, what she's planning, and how much money she's already moved. I leaned back in the chair, projecting a calm I didn't feel. And I want to know why her best friend is helping her commit fraud. It's not fraud if it's community property. It is if she's moving assets to avoid a legitimate divorce settlement. It's also fraud if she's using client funds from Morrison and Associates to finance her new life with Lukas Brandt. Clara's face went white. How do you know about Lukas? About his history of targeting wealthy women? About the 3 previous wives he's bankrupted? I smiled. Clara, I'm a cybersecurity consultant. Research is literally what I do for a living. The blonde tugged at Clara's arm. We're leaving, now. Smart girlfriend, I told Clara. You should listen to her. After they left, I sat alone in the bedroom that had once been mine and Mara's, looking at the evidence of her betrayal scattered across the furniture. Legal documents, bank statements, even what appeared to be a new passport application. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How did it go? Aria. I'd forgotten she'd given me her direct line. I typed back, Interesting, can we meet tomorrow? My office, 10 a.m., 200 Clarendon Street, 47th floor. I spent the next hour going through the papers Clara and her girlfriend had left behind. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Mara hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been systematically looting our joint accounts for months, transferring money to offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands. But the most damning document was a partnership agreement between Mara and Lukas, dated 3 weeks ago. She'd committed to investing $2.5 million in his latest development project, money that came from her firm's client accounts. Securities fraud, just like Aria had predicted. I photographed everything, uploaded the images to an encrypted cloud server, and then carefully returned the documents to exactly where I'd found them. If Mara wanted to play games, I'd play along, but I was going to win. The next morning, I stood outside 200 Clarendon Street, looking up at the gleaming tower that housed some of Boston's most prestigious law firms and investment companies. The Venton family offices occupied the entire 47th floor, a testament to old money and older power. Aria was waiting for me in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. She'd traded yesterday's casual clothes for a power suit that probably cost more than my car, but her smile was warm and genuine. "You look like a man who had an interesting evening," she observed. "You could say that." I handed her my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken. "Mara's been busy." Aria scrolled through the images, her expression growing darker with each document. "This is worse than I thought. She's not just stealing from you, she's embezzling from her clients. The question is, what do we do about it? We stop her, before she destroys more lives and before she hands Lukas Brandt another victim." Aria set down the phone and looked at me seriously. "But I need to know you're committed to this, Julian. Once we start down this path, there's no going back." I thought about Clara's dismissive laughter, about Mara's casual cruelty at the airport, about 12 years of marriage reduced to a financial transaction. "I'm committed." "Good." Aria's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because your wife just made the biggest mistake of her life. She picked a fight with the wrong family. As she outlined her plan, I realized that Mara had been right about one thing. I wasn't the same man she'd married. That Julian Kepler had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best of people. This Julian Kepler was something else entirely. 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Morrison & Associates, watching Mara's world begin to crumble in real time. The morning had started with a series of carefully orchestrated moves that would have made a chess grandmaster proud. At 9 a.m., an anonymous tip had been called in to the SEC regarding potential securities violations at one of Boston's most prestigious private equity firms. The tip included specific account numbers, transaction dates, and the name of a particular partner who might be worth investigating. At 9:15, a similar tip was called in to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. At 9:30, Aria Venton had called Morrison & Associates directly, expressing concern about irregularities she'd noticed in her family's investment portfolio. By 10 a.m., there were 3 black SUVs parked outside the building, and men in expensive suits were carrying boxes of documents to waiting vehicles. My phone buzzed with a text from Mara. "What did you do?" I ignored it. She'd figure it out soon enough. The next text came an hour later. "Julian, we need to talk. This is serious." Still nothing from me. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. "Federal investigation targets prestigious investment firm," scrolled across the bottom of every screen in the coffee shop. Mara's name hadn't been mentioned yet, but it would be. My phone rang. Mara's number. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came 5 minutes later, then a third. On the 4th call, I finally answered. "Julian, thank God. Where are you?" Mara's voice was tight with panic. "Boston," I said calmly. "Where are you?" "That doesn't matter right now. The FBI is at my office. They're asking questions about client accounts, about unauthorized transfers. Julian, I think someone's trying to frame me." "That's terrible," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know, but... Wait. Julian, where exactly are you? Are you at the house?" "Why?" "Because someone broke in yesterday. Clara said she went by to check on things and the place was ransacked. Did you see anything?" I almost laughed. Clara's story was getting more creative by the hour. "No, I haven't been to the house. I'm staying at a hotel." "Which hotel?" "The Ritz," I lied smoothly. I was actually staying at a Holiday Inn in Cambridge, but Mara didn't need to know that. "Julian, Listen to me carefully. I need you to go to the house and check the safe in the basement. There are some documents there that I need you to destroy. What kind of documents? Just business papers, nothing important. But if the FBI gets hold of them, they might misinterpret what they mean. I see. I watched another black SUV pull up outside Morrison and Associates. Mara, can I ask you something? What? How long have you been sleeping with Lukas Brandt? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Julian, because I have to say, the timing is interesting. You start an affair with a man who's known for targeting wealthy women, and suddenly you're moving money offshore and committing securities fraud. It's almost like you're following a playbook. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The question is, are you a willing participant or are you just another one of his victims? Another long pause. When Mara spoke again, her voice was different. Harder, more calculating. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Julian. Enlighten me. Lukas isn't just some con man. He's connected to people who don't appreciate interference in their business arrangements. If you're behind what's happening at my office, you need to stop. Now. Or what? Or you might find yourself in more trouble than you can handle. The line went silent. I sat back in my chair, processing what I'd just heard. Mara wasn't just committing fraud. She was working with people dangerous enough to threaten her own husband. The woman I'd been married to for 12 years had become someone I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed with a text from Aria. Phase 2 is ready. Are you? I looked across the street at the chaos outside Morrison and Associates, at the reporters gathering like vultures, at the federal agents methodically dismantling my wife's career. Ready, I typed back. Phase 2 was elegant in its simplicity. While the FBI was focused on Mara's professional misconduct, Aria's private investigators were documenting her personal life. Every restaurant where she'd met Lukas, every hotel where they'd spent afternoons together, every expensive gift he'd bought her with what was probably stolen money. But the real trap was more subtle. Aria had used her family's connections to ensure that when Mara inevitably tried to access her offshore accounts, the transactions would be flagged by international banking authorities. Every dollar she'd stolen would become evidence in her own prosecution. She's trapped, Aria explained when we met that evening at her office. The money trail leads directly back to her, and Lukas is nowhere to be found. What do you mean, nowhere to be found? He disappeared yesterday, checked out of his hotel, closed his local bank accounts, and bought a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. Your wife is holding the bag for everything. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. Mara had been so focused on escaping our marriage that she'd walked straight into a trap that would destroy her life. There's something else, Aria continued. My investigators found evidence that Lukas has been recording his encounters with Mara. Videos, audio recordings, everything. Blackmail material. Exactly. Which means even if she wanted to come clean, he has leverage over her. Aria leaned back in her chair. Julian, I think your wife is in real danger. The irony wasn't lost on me. After everything Mara had done, I was still worried about her safety. Maybe that made me weak, or maybe it just made me human. What do you suggest? We give her one chance to come clean. Tell her what we know. Offer her a way out if she cooperates with the authorities. Aria's expression was serious. But if she refuses, we let the system handle her. And if she accepts, then maybe she can salvage something from this mess. A reduced sentence, witness protection, a chance to start over somewhere else. It was more mercy than Mara deserved, but it was also the right thing to do. Despite everything, I didn't want to see her destroyed completely. Set up the meeting, I said. As I left Aria's office that night, I realized that somewhere in the process of planning my revenge, I'd become someone I didn't recognize either. The old Julian would have confronted Mara directly, would have tried to save their marriage through communication and counseling. This Julian was playing a much more dangerous game, one where the stakes were measured in years of prison time and lives destroyed. But it was too late to turn back now. Mara had started this war when she canceled my ticket at Heathrow. Now it was time to finish it. The meeting was set for neutral ground, a private dining room at the Four Seasons, the kind of place where wealthy people went to discuss unpleasant business away from prying eyes. Aria had chosen it deliberately, a reminder of the world Mara was about to lose. I arrived early, nursing a whiskey and watching the harbor through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Boston looked different from up here, cleaner, more ordered, like a city where consequences were just suggestions for other people. Mara arrived exactly on time, which didn't surprise me. Even facing federal charges, she maintained the punctuality that had made her successful in business. She looked exhausted, older somehow, as if the stress of the past week had aged her years. "Julian?" She sat across from me, her movements careful and controlled. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for coming." I gestured to the chair beside her. "Aria should be here shortly." "Aria Venton? What does she have to do with this?" "Everything, as it turns out." I took a sip of my drink, studying my wife's face. "Tell me, Mara, when did you first realize you were in over your head?" "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. When did you figure out that Lukas wasn't just a charming businessman, but a professional con artist who's been playing you from the beginning?" Mara's composure cracked slightly. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. It started innocently enough. Lukas approached me about investing in his development project. The numbers looked good, the projections were solid. It seemed like a legitimate opportunity. But he wanted more money than I had available. He suggested creative financing options, ways to access larger pools of capital. She looked out the window, avoiding my eyes. I knew it was wrong, but the potential returns were enormous. "So you started embezzling from client accounts." "I prefer to think of it as unauthorized borrowing. The plan was to return the money before anyone noticed. Except Lukas disappeared with your investment, and now you're facing federal charges." I leaned forward. "Mara, you've been played. Lukas Brandt isn't his real name, and this isn't his first time running this particular scam." "That's impossible. I did background checks, due diligence." "You did background checks on a carefully constructed false identity. The real Lukas Brandt passed away in a car accident 3 years ago in Nevada." The color drained from Mara's face. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been investigating your boyfriend since the day you left me stranded at Heathrow." I showed her my phone, scrolling through photos of the man she knew as Lukas, with different names, different women, different victims. "His real name is Michael Irons, and he's wanted by the FBI in connection with at least 6 similar schemes." Mara stared at the photos, her breathing shallow. "Oh God, what have I done?" "You've committed multiple federal crimes while being manipulated by a professional criminal," Aria said, sliding into the chair beside me. "The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" Mara looked between us, finally understanding the scope of her situation. "What do you want from me?" "Full cooperation with the federal investigation," Aria said without hesitation. "Complete disclosure of all financial transactions, all communications with Michael Irons, and testimony that will help them build a case against him. And in return, we help you negotiate a plea agreement that might keep you out of federal prison." Aria placed a business card on the table. "This is the number for the best white-collar defense attorney in Boston. He's expecting your call." Mara picked up the card with trembling fingers. "Why are you helping me?" "Because despite everything you've done, Julian still cares about you," Aria said. "And because Michael Irons needs to be stopped before he destroys more lives." "There's something else," Mara said quietly. "Michael has compromising materials, videos, recordings. He said if I ever tried to expose him, he'd release them publicly. We know, I said. Aria's investigators found evidence of his blackmail operations. That's additional leverage for your plea negotiations. Mara was quiet for a long time, processing everything we'd told her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Julian, I'm sorry. For all of it. The affair, the money, leaving you at the airport. I thought I was so smart, so sophisticated. I thought I could handle anything. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I was wrong about everything. Yes, I said simply. You were. Can you ever forgive me? I considered the question seriously. Could I forgive the woman who'd betrayed our marriage, stolen our money, and publicly humiliated me? Could I move past 12 years of history for the sake of a few moments of honesty? I don't know, I said finally, but I can help you survive this, if you're willing to do the right thing. Mara nodded slowly. What do I need to do? Aria slid a folder across the table. Everything's in here. Contact information for the attorney, a timeline for cooperation with federal investigators, and a preliminary asset recovery plan. If you follow these steps exactly, you might salvage something from this disaster. And if I don't? Then you'll spend the next 10 years in federal prison while Michael Irons moves on to his next victim. The choice was simple, really. Mara could either cooperate and potentially rebuild her life, or she could continue protecting a man who'd never cared about her as anything more than a mark. I'll make the call, she said. As we left the restaurant, Aria and I walked in comfortable silence toward the parking garage. The evening air was crisp, carrying the salt smell of the harbor and the distant sound of traffic. Do you think she'll follow through? Aria asked. She doesn't have a choice. Mara's many things, but she's not stupid. She'll cooperate. I stopped walking and turned to face her. What happens now? Now we wait. The FBI builds their case. Michael Irons gets arrested when he tries to access his offshore accounts, and justice takes its course. Aria smiled. And you decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. It was a good question. The man who'd been married to Mara Solon was gone, destroyed in an airport champagne bar and reborn in a hotel conference room. This new Julian Kepler was harder, more calculating, less trusting of the world and the people in it. But he was also free. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thank you for trusting me. Aria hesitated for a moment. Julian, I hope you know that this partnership doesn't have to end here. My family's business could use someone with your skills. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a future, one where your talents are properly appreciated. I looked out at the city lights reflecting off the harbor, at the world of possibilities that stretched beyond the ruins of my marriage. Somewhere out there, Michael Irons was probably planning his next scam, confident that he'd escaped justice once again. He was wrong about that, just like Mara had been wrong about me. I'll think about it, I said. 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courtroom watching Mara testify against the man she'd known as Lukas Brandt. Her cooperation had indeed led to a reduced sentence, 3 years in minimum security, with the possibility of parole in 18 months. Michael Irons, on the other hand, was facing life in prison on charges ranging from wire fraud to racketeering. Aria's investigators had uncovered a criminal enterprise spanning multiple states and dozens of victims. As I watched my ex-wife describe how she'd been manipulated and used, I felt something I hadn't expected. Closure. Not forgiveness exactly, but an understanding that we'd both been victims of our own choices and someone else's greed. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse, into the bright Boston sunshine. Aria was waiting by her car, looking elegant as always in a tailored suit and designer sunglasses. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like it's finally over." "Good, because I have a proposition for you." She handed me an envelope. "Open it." Inside was a partnership agreement with Venton Securities, a new division of the family business focused on cybersecurity and fraud prevention. The salary was twice what I'd been making as an independent consultant. "What do you say, partner?" I looked at the contract, then at Aria, then at the city where I'd built and lost and rebuilt my life. The old Julian Kepler would have agonized over the decision, would have worried about the implications and the complications. This Julian Kepler knew exactly what he wanted. "I say yes." As we drove away from the courthouse, I realized that Mara had been right about one thing. I wasn't the same man she'd married. But that wasn't a weakness. It was an evolution.